great speakers today. And so I really invite all the people here that are following to use the chat to ask some question to the speakers. So you have two ways to have interaction during this seminar. You can use the chat, and we will use some question of the chat to involve and to ask question and have a question a session during the seminar. But you can also have meetings with the speakers, and so you can use a B2B tool. And so we will take and put a link in the chat, and you can use it. If you are not registered from the time now, it's not a problem. You can make the registration. It takes 2 minutes to go through the tool, and you can ask for some meetings after the seminar. So you can have two ways to make a matchmaking today. So this let's say 6 packs series is coming from an organization, and it's inside an European project. It's the Smart Energy Project. It's an European one with 5 clusters, and we exchange information. And the objective of this project is to make some collaboration between players, SMEs, and R&D centers and other players inside the digital energy in Europe sectors. The project has started in March last year, and as everyone knows, March last year, the world has changed. And so the objective was to make real exchange, and so to go in missions in Italy, in France, in Belgium, in Hungary, and to make some exploratory trips and to make exchanges. But we cannot move. Everyone is at home, or maybe in your office, but still we are close from our homes. And so we have digitalized this organization. And so we're quite happy to make it happen. So today we will go through different speakers, and the first one we will start with the framework from European Commission with Achille Anossé, that he will present us the overview of European framework and the implementation pathways from Europe. So I will directly give the floor to Achille. So, Achille, you can share your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Cedric. I will try to share my screen. Here we are. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's not full one, so you
yes.
can, yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting the Commission to speak at this training session. So my name is Achille Anossé, and I work for DGNR Unit B1, responsible for consumers, just transition, and local initiatives. Today, I will refresh most probably your memories on the legal framework for REC and KEC, renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities, in addition to presenting some implementation pathways we have observed so far at member state level. Some of these practices are a direct implementation of the EU legal framework for REC and KEC. Others have preceded the EU legal framework, but are nonetheless relevant as an implementation pathway according to us. Please note, as you will see in the disclaimer, that the presentation of these implementation pathways does not imply that they are the preferred option for a member state to take, nor that the Commission has reached a definite conclusion on their compliance with the Electricity Market Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. Also, some of the provided information is deduced from legislative proposals, which are, of course, which may, of course, still be subject to change. That being said, let's start today with the legal concept of REC and KEC. As you can see in this diagram, both concepts share a common core, which is that they both can operate on the renewable electricity market. They can have any legal entity, can range from a partnership to a cooperative. the membership structure is that it has to be open and voluntary, which are very much democratic principles, and the primary purpose is to provide environmental, economic, or social community benefits, which puts REC and KEC into the sphere of the social economy. There are also some key differences that primarily pertain to the membership structure, where a REC is limited to a geographical location and is thus a so-called community of location. Shareholders and members of KEC can be located in different geographical areas and thus provides more flexibility and opportunities to scale up and to have members from all across the country or even all across Europe if cross-border participation is allowed. This effect is amplified by the fact that KEC can, in a KEC, also large energy companies may participate, whilst this is not the case for REC, provided, of course, they do not exercise any decision-making power. So I provide you an overview of all of the key concepts, and you see effective control, you see autonomous, you see proximity. This is all quite abstract, and it will be up to the legislator and or regulator to either copy paste or further implement these abstract provisions. And in this regard, I just wish to highlight one particular concept, which is arguably the most contested so far, which is the element of proximity that relates to renewable energy communities. Now, if we look at the element of proximity, we can identify several approaches to implementation. We have a network-based approach, a more technical approach that is seen in Luxembourg, Slovenia, and Austria, where it's very much located downstream of the high and or medium voltage electricity transformer station or behind the low voltage transformer station. Important to note here is that we see that these definitions are usually coupled to the activity of collective self-consumption or energy sharing. And the first recommendation here, which has already been formulated, but it's very important to reiterate, is that member states should be mindful not to equate the principle of locality for collective self-consumption with the principle of proximity for renewable energy communities, because the renewable energy communities can do more activities than collective self-consumption alone, such as aggregation or supply or even the provision of energy efficiency services. A second approach is the administrative one, which is very much structured along the internal organization of a state. So we're talking about municipalities, provinces, districts. However, a member state has decided to divide administratively its land. That could be a defining criterion as well for the element of proximity. And we see this in Greece, where 50% plus one of the members need to be located in this district where the community has its headquarters. A third approach is the distance-based approach. We don't see currently a direct example of this with regard to energy communities specifically, but an example would be an 8-kilometer radius in which the members need to be located from the high queue of the energy community. Finally, we have the ad hoc approach. Such an approach leaves some room to consider local conditions such as geographical location, population density, composition of the load, available resources, technology used. And this can all be taken into account when defining the geographical perimeter ad hoc. This has a certain benefit in the sense that the flexibility allows for different technology uses depending on the geographical context, and as such, to give it a bit more color, it can be imagined that an urban REC would require a more flexible interpretation of the concept of proximity if it wishes to invest in a windmill rather than a solar rooftop PV panels. And finally, we have the hybrid approach, which combines any of the approaches that I just mentioned earlier. Then enough about the concept. I have a limited amount of time, and I've chosen to focus on the enabling framework. That being said, the legal concept and the coloring thereof and the implementation thereof is equally important for energy communities, because essentially it's a social concept, and this will need to be preserved by the member states. Now, if we look at the enabling framework for REC and KEC in this diagram, we see the relationship between both. So the bottom is where KEC is situated, but also REC, and they share a common core there. They have certain rights and responsibilities allocated to them to facilitate their emergence on the electricity market and their market integration as such. These rights and responsibilities, they primarily relate to procedures, tariffs, and the enabling of activities such as energy sharing. Now, if we move up the triangle, we see that a REC has some additional privileges on top of the rights and responsibilities that they share with KEC. And I spelled them out here. As you can see, this is access to financial instruments and informations, a customized support scheme, specificities of renewable energy communities need to be taken into account. In other words, the removal of unjustified barriers and the regulatory and capacity building support to public authorities. Now, today I will zoom in on some of these activities, responsibilities, and obligations and rights. And I'll start with energy sharing. What I'm presenting here is the complete overview of the current legal framework within the context of energy communities for energy sharing. Now, as we see for citizen and renewable energy communities, energy sharing is allowed for community-owned production units. This they share. If we look at the charges and the tariffs and the levies that are applicable when they engage in this sharing and they make use of the public grid, we see that also in both cases, it is spelled out that they shouldn't be exempt. Apologies. They shouldn't be exempt from the relevant cost charges and levies, or that it should be without prejudice to applicable network charges, tariffs, and levies. Of course, it is up to the member state to ultimately determine to what extent such exemptions from tariffs would be in line with the principle of non-discrimination and cost reflectivity. But on that, we'll talk more in a couple of slides when I come to the contested topic of tariffs. Then if my PowerPoint wants to go forward at least. Yes, okay. So if we look at the implementation pathways, we see two very interesting examples in Luxembourg and in Austria. What we see in Luxembourg, that energy sharing within the REC is allowed. In Austria, energy sharing is allowed within a local REC and a regional REC. They make a differentiation there depending on whether they're below the medium voltage or low voltage level. And energy sharing is also allowed for a KEC. In Luxembourg, members need to be located downstream of the high or medium voltage transformer station, connected to the low voltage station operated by the DSO. In Austria, the REC as a whole needs to be located within the territory of one DSO, and the KEC may be located in areas of several DSOs. So here we see indeed this opportunity for KEC to be scaled up and to operate across different regions. Then third, we see that for Luxembourg, there is actually a choice between the DSO being responsible for the attribution or the REC being responsible for the attribution. If the DSO is responsible, there is already a sharing key that is under development currently, as I understand, with the regulator and the DSOs, which would be a static approach. Or the REC can decide themselves how to attribute, and they can even delegate that responsibility to a service provider. When we look at Austria, the DSO is responsible for the attribution. There is no choice for the REC to take up this responsibility, and there is a choice between following a static or a dynamic approach. If responsible for attribution, the REC has the obligation to communicate local quantities at least every month. Furthermore, there are some specificities for Austria. It's explicitly spelled out that the DSO has the obligation to share data. And last but not least, there is a reduced grid tariff, a local grid tariff introduced for energy communities that engage in energy sharing. Now, if we move to the next topic, which is tariffs, and this is a very interesting topic because there is a potential that energy communities can bring to the system, which is derived from local balancing, local production and consumption, and this can result in a reduced use of the public grid, and so also a reduced costs for the grid. And this should then arguably, according to some member states, translate into local grid tariffs. However, this benefit for the local public grid is very much contested as well. There needs to be additional research to really show that there is an added value at all times of energy communities for the system itself, and it will be in most cases very much context dependent, and also very much dependent on the capacity of the grid in the first place. Now, if we look at the EU framework, we see that for both REC and KEC, network tariffs will need to be cost reflective. For KEC, they will need to be non-discriminatory, and they need to contribute in an adequate and balanced way to the overall cost of the system. Now, at member state level, if we look at the implementation pathways and approaches, we can identify three. The first one I already mentioned, which are the local grid tariffs that are being applied in Austria, which implies an exemption from grid fees above the grid level of REC, and the removal of consumption-based surcharges. There can also be no exemption at all from grid tariffs, which is currently the approach we see Flanders taking, although this decree is still not at its final stage yet, and is still a draft version. So we will have to see whether that remains so. And finally, we have the ex post remuneration. And here we see not really a direct implementation already at member state level. However, we are aware of this case of Schoonschip in the Netherlands that was part of a regulatory sandbox, where it was proven that the local energy sharing and demand side management enabled the DSO to connect a new neighborhood with one connection with approximately half the capacity normally used for a neighborhood of that size. So there the benefits were very much tangible, and this also resulted in diverted investment costs. And it would be appropriate then to remunerate the energy community for the system benefits they provide in this regard. Then we will move on to procedures, and here the directives, they spell out the obligation for fair, proportionate, non-discriminatory and transparent procedures being applied to energy communities, both REC and KEC. This relates to production and supply related procedures, registration and licensing procedures, namely, and grid access procedures. In primarily these procedures are covered by this clause. If we zoom in at grid access procedures first, we see a very interesting implementation in Ireland, where there is a so-called enduring connection policy too. And this enduring connection policy includes specific privileged connection pathways for community-led renewable energy projects. As such, the applications by the project may be submitted at any time, while normally this is confined to a 1-month period. For other types of projects, building permits are not required when applying for a connection, and there is a possibility to retain the connection capacity for 2 years in order to obtain a building permit. Very interesting privilege that we see is directly coupled to a very prominent barrier that is being encountered by energy communities in reality. The difficulty, the administrative burdensome process, the long duration of obtaining these permits, and then if it goes to the higher level administrative court and it's being contested, then it can take really a long time for them to obtain it, and they might lose their connection. Then you have the reduced initial application fee deposit, which meets the limited financial resources available to energy communities. The DSO will decide if it's feasible to have the connection assessment processed on a non-batch basis and issued before the next batch application window closes. And 15 connection offers are reserved each year for community projects that were not processed on a non-batch basis. And if we move on to production and supply related procedures, we see as an implementation pathway the easing of production and supply licensing requirements. And this has been shown in Greece, where there's an exemption from the obligation to pay the annual fee for retaining an electricity production license. There's a transfer of production licenses for production installations exclusively owned by the community within the same region. And for supply licensing, there is a minimum supply licensing. The minimum supply licensing capital is reduced for energy communities. So far, the procedures. Then we also have the specific privilege that I mentioned earlier, which is the tools to facilitate access to finance and information for energy communities. And here we see again an interesting implementation in Ireland. This is targeted at sustainable energy communities, which is very much has a very broad interpretation, much broader than renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities. There are not that many specific constraints in terms of actor configuration, for example. And there they implemented this sustainable energy community program, and they call it the SEC journey, which consists out of 3 steps: learn, plan, and do. And in the first step, a community can become a member of the nationwide SEC network, which creates a space for communities to engage and learn from project site visits, seminars, events, and case studies in order to help them identify and develop energy projects. In the second step, the community can enter into a 3-year partnership with the Sustainable Energy Authority and start designing an energy master plan. And during this 3 years period, the community receives active support and mentoring by the Sustainable Energy Authority in order to identify energy saving opportunities, but also other energy related activities such as generation. And in the last step, the community can also apply for dedicated funding to help realize the energy master plan. Then last but not least, the support scheme for energy communities. As I already mentioned, the specificities need to be taken into account when designing a support scheme. Well, in Ireland and in Greece, they have interpreted it as follows. For in Greece, there's an exemption from the bidding procedures for pro-energy community projects up to 6 megawatt for wind farms and up to 1 megawatt for PV. There is in Ireland, there is a community preference category with a capacity up to 30 gigawatt hour, plus an exemption from the requirements to post bid bonds and submit performance security. So that was a brief overview of the implementation pathways that we already identified within the context of the EU legal framework. My last slide is just an overview of what we have collected so far in terms of progress by member states of adopting or proposing legislation for either REC or KIC. Of course, if you see that this list should be updated in any way, or if the training session today provides me additional information, which I hope, I'm happy to update the list, but this is the progress according to our current knowledge. And that was my presentation. I thank you so much for listening in, and let's keep in touch, of course, and thank you very much.
Thank you for this very interesting first presentation. I've a first question in the chat. In the citizen energy communities, does the community has to be the owner of the assets? So if the participants could also share maybe their own generated electricity from their own assets, like a peer-to-peer, I suppose. What is your point of view about this?
For this, wait, I will go back to the. I think within an energy community itself, it's very important that it's the citizen energy community as a collective, as a legal entity that owns the asset. So it's not so much if you as an individual within an energy community, but it's your own property, it's your own asset. I would say that within the legal framework, it would not qualify as such to be part of the energy sharing scheme within the energy community. Of course, you also have for renewable self-consumers, you have a specific provision to engage in energy sharing with your own private assets. So on the basis of that, you could perhaps argue that it would be possible still for you to share electricity produced by your own assets with the electricity produced by the assets of the citizen energy community. This is, of course, a feasibility.
Okay, and in the same topic, so we see, so the community has to own the production units. Do you see in some countries some interpretation or flexibility in this point, maybe with third financing party, for example? Is it possible in this scheme?
Cannot disclose at this point, but let us say that we are flexible. We allow some flexibility in the interpretation of what ownership entails. To give you maybe an illustration of where we would draw the line is if we're talking about a concession, or if we're talking about a lease, rather, it would ultimately, the ownership should go to the energy community. So it would be perfectly possible to engage in a lease contract where you do not have the ownership at that point in time, but ultimately after a certain period of time, the ownership rights should move to the energy community. And this is where we would draw the line.
Yeah. So it's a possibility. Thank you for this very precise answer, because it's a question for the different regions right now. And a last question before to go to the next presentation. We see that for the tariffs, there is cost and benefit analysis that we can provide to prove that there is a potential benefits for the grid. Do you see this type of analysis in some countries right now in Europe?
We are not aware of any of these cost-benefit analysis taking place at this period in time. We will.
We have lost actually for this last question. But it was the end. So luckily, we will come back with. Actually, it was a problem of sound, but so we've heard your answer that there is no cost and benefits analysis right now, but it's just the beginning of this type of exercise, and for sure we will exchange this type of information. So really, thank you for the presentation. We'll keep you on board for a next question if there is. Don't hesitate to use the chat. And so we will go deep in the specific regulation in Wallonia, in the implementation of this framework in Wallonia, with the presentation of Guy Bloch from the lawyers Janson. Guy, if you can share your screen.
C'est toi qui vas mettre le... Tu changes?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Anose. I think you can add to your list the Walloon and the Brussels region as implementation of REC. My small speech today will be divided in 3 parts. Just a recall of the 1 point of the European legislative framework, Article 21.6. Then we're going to move to Brussels, because I would say also some word about the very interesting pilot stuff in the Brussels region, following the ordinance of 2018, and then I finish with the Walloon region. So just for you to recall that one way to fight energy poverty, and it's also the self-consumption and sharing the benefit of the self-consumption in the CRR or CAC. And just one word about the clean energy package. It is the time to place the citizen in the energy transition, where the citizen take ownership of the energy transition. I mean, this is very important to keep that in mind when you look at the REC and the SEC. We place definitely now the citizen in the middle of the scheme. And then a last word on the tenant. As you know, there are tension between building owners and the tenant on PV installation, because normally they don't have as much the benefit of this installation. And I think one of the biggest move of the REC and SEC is definitely to put this tenant in the same foot than the building owner via the REC, and that is something very important. So not only the vulnerable households, that we know that they represent, unfortunately, 20% of the European citizen, but also the tenant, where they present also a lot of part in the energy consumers. So let's move to the Brussels region. By the so-called law ordinance of 2018, two articles define what is we could say a REC. So self-consumption is collective when the supply of electricity is carried out between one or more producer and one or more final consumer, forming a legal entity. And then we have this concept of what said Mr. Anose, of locality, and it is based on the network based, because it is required that the extraction and injection point are located downstream the transformation power in the distribution network. So we have there a sort of definition based on a network based. Have a look to also the word legal entity. As we know, in Belgium, we have this simple partnership, which is a legal entity, but it's very easy to draw up. And it's a transparent company, a partnership, and I think we could think about that as a model. In the next article is Article 90, where Brussels, which is the regulator, has the possibility for limited time to give specific market and tariff rules for defined geographical and electrical area, especially for pilot project. And applying those two articles, two leading project are now under progress. The first one is No Bambin. No Bambin is very interesting project because it's a third party project, and it's PV installed on a school called the Bambin, small kids in French. What is interesting, they put on the roof of that school 24 kilowatt peak power, and the school gets for free the electricity, and it represents something like 17% of their needs. Brussels Environment, and Brussels Environment, which is the third party investor. So we are definitely in a third party concept, get the green certificate, and the excess of power is given for free to the grid. In Brussels, it's Sibelga, to compensate the grid losses, and also to reward the maintenance of the PV. So this is a very interesting concept. There is another Greenpeace Energy, which is starting this month. Next slide. Let's maybe take a look on the contractual side. Normally, we would require 3 different contracts. One were between the entity and the grid DSO. The second between the entity, the CR entity, and the member, the consumer. And the third one between the entity and the producer. It could be more than 3 contracts, but at least 3 different contracts. In Brussels, this entity is called PMO. In French, is Personne Morale Organisatrice. Have a look to the responsibilities and duties on the PMO. The concept is to charge the PMO of all administrative and communication tasks. And PMO is a real intermediary between the participant, and it is totally neutral. One of the first questions was whether a PMO could be the DSO. And immediately the answer was negative, because of potential conflict of interest. But it is said that if no one is ready to take that tasks, we can, with some Chinese wall, envisage to put the DSO as this PMO. But that is the very least solution in case no one is taking the lead. Part of the PMO task would be drafting, concluding, and manage the agreement between the participants, and as well invoicing, and also ensuring the GDPR policy and personal data, because a lot of data could be taken from those participants. Then the PMO gonna buy the surplus of electricity from the producer and determine the allocation method of that surplus. On the other hand, the producer must be member, of course, of the PMO governance and has to maintain the supply contract. It sold its excess of electricity to the PMO within a limited volume need by the consumer, and the producer. In that case, there could be more than one producer, of course. They are responsible for issuing the annual invoice. Of course, the producer is responsible for the injection costs charged by the DSO. Then we look at the consumer, the DSO. The consumer is of course also a member of the PMO governance, and he has to pay the self-consumed electricity and grid tariff, as we say, plus PMO management costs, plus VAT. Of course, VAT is applicable on the deliverance of electricity. We will see maybe later on how this cascade type key allocation is formed in those time of concept. And also he has to maintain a separate electricity supply contract for the difference, a backup contract with its ordinary supply of electricity for the delta of non-self-consumed electricity. On the DSO, of course, they have to provide to the PMO the necessary information with a clear, transparent, non-discriminatory invoicing. That's very basic line. Mr. Anose said exactly that the non-discriminatory way to treat the participant is the key element of the CRM. And then, of course, they have to maintain the security of the network. Well, just to have a look to the allocation of the surplus of electricity. One example could be a cascade type allocation, meaning that there are rounds of several rounds in each quarter of any hour of the year. And in the first round, all the participants get the same number of electricity. And in the second round, the same quantity is allocated, but some of them are as already filled their need, so they will pass their turn, and then the last one will get the final electricity. So it's very interesting how it could work, this type of cascade type allocation, which is very market based, I would say. Concerning the price, of course, as already said, there is some kind of rebate on the price paid to the normal or conventional electricity supplier. And we see now that sort of range between 10–15% up to 20–25% down the final a full electricity price. So there is a substantial advantage to participate to these CR. Normally, the price will no longer rise or fall as a result of the price. So it's a sort of stabilization of the price, not depending on the electricity price, but it could be a part, it could be an algorithm based to depend on this price, but that is not the case today. Well, the next step, of course, as you say, now the philosophy in the Brussels region and the Walloon region is to start with some kind of pilot project and then learn return of experience to finalize the bylaws and the regulatory government decision or ministerial decision. So the regulator is looking very carefully what's happening in those pilot projects to draw lines and to implement, I would say, the law. Of course, there will be some point of attention. Crucial point is the fair amount of remuneration for the DSO, is the coupling with storage, and of course is how to adapt the consumption profiles of the consumer. That will be definitely the next step. So we're still waiting in the Brussels region the bylaws. The third part of my small presentation will be Wallonia. Have a look to the declaration of regional policy declaration in 2019-2024, and it was emphasized that the government will rely on pilot project for collective self-consumption of renewable energy. It will also pay particular attention to the finalization and concrete implementation of the legislation surrounding the development of renewable energy communities, this REC, while respecting the general interest and the objective of the energy transition. So it is a real commitment to provide a framework, and that framework lies in the decree, which is a law, not a name of law in the Walloon region, of the 2nd of May 2019. And there is a definition of what it is there, the REC. The purpose of the REC is to produce, consume, store. Important to note that storage is fundamentally a part of the REC in the Walloon region. And of course, self-renewable energy for the environmental, social, and economical benefit of the participant at the local level using the public network or a private grid. Yes, this is very special. They include the private grid as well. REC, it is said, can also contribute to the balancing of the grid, meaning that the REC would help the ancillary services of the grid. So that is another concept to take into account in the Walloon region. Next point will be that several entities, natural, legal person, with a local parameter can agree to share and store their production and consumption. It is, of course, say that it is exclusively renewable energy sources of high quality of cogeneration. And for the participant, the list is there. Any natural person, municipalities or local authority, and small and medium company located in a local perimeter can participate. Still to define what is the local perimeter in this definition, but it will come soon. The government has the right to review those lists, this list of eligible participants maybe, to increase the number of primary, professional, or commercial activity. So, provided they are not primary, professional, or commercial activity. So the list could be extended, but this is not the object of the company. The local perimeter, again, as it is in the Brussels region, is downstream the transformation station of the grid, of the distribution grid. And local perimeters can have different extent. It is said, considering the technical constraint of the work, that is one point that for consideration as well. It is said that the REC can delegate the management of its activity to a third party. Very interesting opening to professional of management of that kind of activities. The QAP require also at this stage that the REC will be subject to individual authorization. That is important in the future of the bylaws. There will be some authorization. But another advantage of the REC is that there will be no supply license requirement. As you know, any producer of electricity must have a supply license when they sell electricity to a third party. And in Walloon region, the third party is very easy to define, is a different number of company number. So even intra-group, there could be a sale of electricity, which is very restrictive. So if you participate in a SARE, you exempted from a supply license, except of course if you sell the electricity outside the local perimeter. And then a word on the distribution tariff is still to be defined, but methodology should be made by the regulator. So we say that the law aims to ensure the balance between the interest of the member of the REC and the solidarity coverage of the network costs. The grid tariff will be determined by the regulator, the QAPE, but it is deemed to that they will consider the benefits, meaning avoiding costs, avoiding investment, and renewable energy deployment. So last point related to tariff issue is what we call the net metering. It is very debated in Belgium, the net metering, as you know in the press release, but it is said that if you participate in a REC, you cannot benefit from the net metering, the so-called compensation in French. So you have the choose between not participating and still maintaining some of net metering. But if you enter into a REC, it is prohibited to continue the net metering. The four challenges that we can see is access condition, local perimeter. It's also related to state aid issues because we have to be clear that it's not a double state aid, as Mr. Anose said. It's one or the other, or at least very careful. Then we have these special issues on net metering and special tariff, grid tariff, and then the smart metering. Smart metering, again, is mandatory if you participate in a REC. You can have the choice not to have smart meters in your stuff. The Walloon regulator, the COAPE, last year issued 8 recommendations about the future bylaws on CRR. The first one is there must be a legal personality, a legal entity, but I say that we are very smooth legal entity in Belgium. Second, there must be an agreement between the parties. Third, the compensation is not compatible. 4, REC is not subject for granting the supply license, as already said. 5, fifth, the local perimeter should be determined by the government very soon. 6, an individual authorization by the COAPE, and there might be some threshold of self-consumption. 7, this should facilitate a better integration of renewable energy, low cost development, economic advantage, smart metering deployment. And 8, the main beneficiary should be the consumer by an attractive tariff and better valorization of their renewable production. So the next step will be government or ministerial regulation to implement those recommendations. And of course, as already said, the third-party investor mechanism, which is very familiar in Wallonia and in Brussels, should be maintained. And also the rules could be also applicable to professional closed grids. And I finished by 4 pilot projects in Wallonia: eCloud, Merigrid, Sun Horizon, and Coleco. eCloud is the more advanced. It started in July 2019. It is a very interesting project. We have already data. Have a look to the figures in the slide. I'm going fast because I'm running out of my time. 61% of the energy produced was self-consumed. Wow. Saving from 8 up to 8%. Very interesting. The second is Merigrid. This is a combination of DSO, University of Liège, Wallonia, and other company. And with artificial intelligence, the saving is up to 15% of the costs. The third one is Sun Horizon. Unfortunately, it is delayed because of the COVID-19 crisis, but it is on the way. It is on a swimming pool with gas power heat pumps and stratified storage tank. Very interesting in technical stuff. And the very last one is Coleco. It's 7 microgrids in a business park that by 2025 it should be ended. And the targets are very interesting because it's also covering school annual consumption and 20% of the needs of the electricity inhabitants. So, but it is starting. So that is the point. And just a word to say that we have issued a new book on droit des énergies renouvelables. Everything is in that book at this stage, and we thank you for your attention. And if we question, we're ready to answer. Thank
you, Guy, for this presentation. there is a question about the specific reason behind the specific regulation and different regulation between the different regions in Belgium. It's because the legislation for energy is regionalized, and so you will for sure discover the issues and the specificities of the Flemish regulation right now. I just take one question for you, Guy. You have mentioned the producer and consumers roles with this new manager of energy communities PMO role. So do you see that the supplier role, you have mentioned that this is a backup contract. You have mentioned that, and I think it's very interesting because if the supplier is just in the future a backup contract, do you see that this role of suppliers is in danger?
Not at all. I mean, it's very conventional to have a backup contract in case that the PV are not working, or a sort of outage, which is so there must be always a backup contract. But when I say backup, it's the terminology used in the technical stuff, but it depends on the power injected into the self-consumption. But there must be always a backup contract for the delta of between the production and the consumption. So yeah, it's a different. You're right. It's a different angle of view with your supplier, conventional supplier. It's more, I would say, a service contract that where they cope the curve, and it's a service contract more than just selling electricity without any staff. And it could be a part also of the scheme where they facilitate the resale of electricity in case there are too much electricity, for example, where nobody's at home, and that is something. So I see more a more sophisticated contract than just selling electricity with a price.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So we will discover the specific regulation right now for the Flemish part. So the other region for sure so we discover here the Wallonia part and Brussels part. So Belgium is 3 regions with 3 specific legislation for the energy part, and so we go we will discover the specific issues in the Flemish legislation about energy communities, and I'm happy to let the floor to Hilde Derde from the Meta lawyers. So Hilde, if you can share your screen.
Oui. En dan moest ik nog...
Yes.
Yeah, now it's okay, I think.
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for giving me the floor. We will, Kobe, Jakkers and myself will give you some issues concerning the Flemish legislation. I have to start with to say that in Flanders, or in the Flemish region, I should say, we are not so far as in the Brussels or Walloon region. But there is a project which has been submitted. I come to it. First, I will go to the timeline. So we have the European legislation, which was being fully explained by, or which was well explained by Achille. And then there was a start of the Lex Project in January 2019. The Lex Project is a very big project concerning energy communities. It's one of the largest projects in Flanders, which was being given, and it's still on the way. It is a project where there were different participants, and where we participated too, with our office, to look, and I come to it, to look to the legal form and to make the judicial basis. But I also live in the Ophemstraat, which is one of the sites, which is one of the energy communities. in participating to the Rolex project. It's one of the pilot sites. It's a street where it's mostly private people, private citizens who live here. There are no PMEs or other enterprises. And then on the other side, there are different groups also on tariffs, on the technical issues, but also 10 pilot sites on chosen on different which have different characteristics. So there were a few citizens, as with me, or which were transferred from business to citizens. There were old industry projects, there are new, and there is one too in Haasrode, which is also in Leuven. It is an industrial part where we have also our offices, and there we looked, and I come to it for eventually a third form, because big companies can't participate in what is now written in the European legislation. Yes, they can participate, but they have not a lot to say, and I think there are only few who want to participate on that basis. Then there was a consultation of the VREG. The VREG is the QAPE is the Flemish QAPE, as explained by Guy. Then we have the first regulatory sandbox in Torpark Genk. We had the advice of the VREG then on the Flemish legislation, on the draft of it, and then the proposal of the Flemish government, which is the draft which has been approved in the Flemish government, which hasn't been submitted yet to the Flemish Parliament, where it has to be spoken. So we part from the two directives with the REC and the SEC, and then we go to the Rolex project. I already explained a bit of that project. So it includes work packages focusing on the implementation of a Flemish legal framework on energy communities. We contributed in that part concerning the legal form, where we think but Kobe will return on it, where we think where the VZW or the SBL in French and the cooperative will be most likely the adapted for the legal form for energy communities. We worked also on consumer protection. As everyone knows, the free supplier choice is one of the very important issues in the European legislation, also in Belgium. And so when you participate in an energy community, how will it fit with that very important statement? It's also not only the free supplier choice, but also in Flanders, in Belgium, specifically both, there is a large consumer protection for people in energy matters, still more than for other matters. And there is an extra contract between the federal government and the suppliers, energy suppliers. Yes, sorry for people watching from abroad. In Belgium, well, the energy is for the regions, but consumer protection is one of the federal competences. So it is always going one through another. Excuse me, it was not me who invented it, but it can seem a bit complicated. Then we worked also on the third form. As I said, our offices are in the Haasrode industrial park of Leuven, which is rather new. think 20 or 30 years it exists. It's also with research park, so there are new technologies working on it, and there was a lot of interest from the enterprises who are there to exchange, and so we looked how it could be done, and we think there should be, as the VREG also suggested so already, it would be good when there would be a third form admitting larger companies to make such energy communities too, and to have also more in that they can decide themselves what they want, but evidently it has to be in very well determined and in very well guidelines. And then we worked also on an energy manager, what means that we think it would be a good idea that in an energy, or could be a good idea to have in an energy community someone like a syndicus in the apartment and buildings. So someone who takes care of the management of how everything works. It cannot be completely it's not a complete assimilation is not possible, because that's of the institute in the law. There is other the basis is different, but the work which has been done, which is be done by this syndicus could be very well compared with work that should be done by an energy manager. There was then the consultation of the VREG, allowing the stakeholders to comment on important issue. Here was the role of the DSO, and facilitating measures for the EC, the energy community. And then there was a first regulatory sandbox recognized by the Flemish government. It concerns the Torp Park in Genk. It is a new park which was built on the in the mines. Before it was the mines, and there was a whole reconversion, and the Torp Park in Genk is built on that. And there is the Flemish government allowed exceptions to certain applicable provisions of the Flemish rules on energy supply. So there they said, well, in the Torp Park, they can exchange energy between different buildings without needing a supplier license, which is normally necessary to deliver energy or to exchange. So here it's for 2 years that it has been allowed. I think it's now already half a year or maybe almost a year that it is going. And there was also the introduction of the concept of the energy manager. I refer to it, as we already spoken this too in the Rolex project, that it is someone who manages the energy community. And then there was the advice of the VREG on the Flemish, so the Flemish energy regulator, as I already mentioned. And it was on the draft of the Flemish legislation, and there they make suggestions on how to implement the EU directive, and they identify some issues policy makers have to decide on when they make the Flemish legislation. And then their important things were they try to define the participants of both ECs as broad as possible, and then consider allowing forms of ECs, I already referred to it, or energy sharing broader than the SEC or REC. It's an issue as the effective control is limited to SMEs, natural persons, and local authorities, and they say, well, you have to think about something, a different form, which can allow bigger companies to participate or to have their own form. I will give now the floor to Kobe, who will give you an explanation of the issues defined in the Flemish government. Thank you.
So hello everyone, I hope I'm unmuted now. So we can continue our presentation with the issues that we identified. Of course, this is just a list of 6 issues that we chose for this presentation, but of course, this is not all the issues. There are still more, but we think these 6 issues are interesting to include in this presentation. So firstly, we're going to talk about the legal form of the energy community. That is to say, what legal vehicle is most suitable for the energy community? What are the conditions? Does the Flemish proposal say anything about the legal form? And then we will go on to what does the Flemish proposal that is now or soon will be discussed in Parliament, what does it say about the internal rules of the energy community? Are there certain things that have to be included? Does it give a lot of freedom to the energy communities? How does that work? Then the third issue that we will discuss is the European directives talk about effective control, and how does the Flemish proposal define effective control? How does it work? Then the fourth issue that we will talk about is how does the Flemish legislator interpret proximity? How does it come forward in the proposal? And the fifth issue that we identified is the right to own distribution systems. This is, of course, an optional provision in the European directives. And we want to know, what did the Flemish legislator propose in relation to the right to own distribution systems for energy communities? And then the last and the sixth issue that we will discuss is who is allowed to participate in energy sharing. So the first issue is the legal form. The current proposal doesn't decide in favor of a specific legal form, so it mainly only transposes the provisions in the EU directives. That is to say, the purpose of the legal entity is to provide ecological, economic, or social community benefits for its members or the local areas where it operates. And secondly, financial profit can only be subordinate, excuse me, to the main purpose of the legal entity. So that is mainly also what is provided in the EU directives. And so we see in our view, mainly 2 Belgian legal forms. That is not to say that others are excluded, but we think that because as long as the legislator itself doesn't say anything about the legal form, it is very much left to the interpretation. But we think that there are 2 Belgian legal forms that seem to be very suitable for energy community projects. That is, on the one hand, the TWEED, that is a non-profit organization, and the CV, the cooperative venture. Then was also important, it's not strictly about the legal form, but also about how to get to form an energy community, that there is provided in the Flemish proposal that the energy community has to notify the VREG. The VREG is the Flemish regulator concerning certain elements of the energy community, namely the activities of the energy community, the composition of the energy community, what is the energy community about, who are the participants, and in case of the renewable energy community, they also have to inform the VREG of the way proximity is applied in the specific case of that renewable energy community. But to that we will come back later. Then secondly, about the internal rules of the energy community. So the current proposal leaves a lot of room for the energy communities to organize themselves, but they also provide some provisions about what should be done to organize the energy community. Well, firstly, the members of the same energy community have to enter into an agreement with the energy community about their rights and obligations. And in case of energy sharing, the agreement has to contain a distribution key concerning the way that the shared energy is divided between the participants of the energy community. The Flemish government can further decide on the details of this agreement, but in the current proposal, it is already provided that there has to be a distribution key, that has to be contained in the agreement. So the rules concerning effective control, to which we come back in the next slide, they also have to be included in the statutes of the energy community. That is very important, especially for the citizen energy community. And it is also very interesting because here there is room for the Flemish legislator to interpret the concept of effective control. But so that also has to be contained in the statutes of the energy community in order to be a proper energy community. Then next, the Flemish government can further decide upon rules about the minimum content of the statutes of the energy community, but so as they say themselves, they have to further decide on this. But in the current proposal, it is not yet very detailed. The proposal also contains a possibility for the energy community to outsource the management of the energy community, and then we come back again to the concept of the energy manager, as where we previously talked about. So the current proposal mostly implements literally from the EU directives. A lot remains to be decided. Is there a mandate possibility? We think in any case there is, because on general private law, there is always a mandate possibility. And this also can be applied to the energy community as long as this is done in a way that is compatible with free supplier's choice. What also remains to be decided is what are the specific invoicing responsibilities of the energy community. Are there any rules? What are the rules? How should we interpret them? Is there a lot of leeway for the energy communities to organize this? And the VREG in previous advices also just suggested that the Flemish government should provide good practices on how energy communities can organize themselves. Then we come to the concept how to define effective control. The EU directives provide that natural persons, local authorities, and SMEs should have effective control on both ECs. The EU directives do not have a strict definition for effective control. So it is important to revise that in a citizen energy community, the participation is broad, but effective control is a limiting factor. And in the renewable energy community, participation is linked to proximity. Then the third, the proposal of the Flemish government contains the following definition. rights, agreements, or other means, separately or together, with regards to all factual or legal circumstances through which they can have a decisive influence on the activities of the energy community. And then they give the two specific situations, namely owner rights or user rights on all activa of the energy community or parts of it. And on the other hand, rights or agreements that guarantee a decisive influence on the composition, voting, or decisions of the bodies of the energy community. Then we go on to the next issue, that is how to define proximity. The Flemish government chooses to define proximity on the basis of technical and geographical criteria. So I think if we have to categorize it under one of the systems, I think this is more of a hybrid system, so which can be further detailed by the Flemish government. And they also add in the proposal that the criteria have to be evaluated in the lights of the goals and activities of the renewable energy community. What do we mean by that? Well, for example, I think the purpose is to examine, for example, if there's a wind energy project, that there will be more wide or a larger scope for a wind energy project, for example, than for a solar energy project that is more small scale than a wind energy project. So the fifth issue that we talk about is the right to manage distribution systems. Again, this is optional for the Flemish legislator to provide. And in the current proposal, the Flemish government chose to not allow it. So the current proposal doesn't allow energy communities to manage distribution systems. So there is indeed a facilitating role for the DSO, as energy communities have to rely on the public grid. However, they did leave a bit of an open door for it in the future, because they provided that the Flemish government could allow regulatory sandboxes for projects that want to experiment with the managing of distribution systems. Then the last issue that we will talk about is who is allowed to participate in energy sharing. So the proposal introduces a difference between self-consumption and energy sharing. This is a bit different as in the EU law, where so the term of collective self-consumption is left out in the Flemish proposal. And they also twitched it a bit that energy sharing contains electricity as well as thermal energy. And it is important to mention that the whole concept of energy sharing relies a bit also on the exemption from a supply license. As the activity energy sharing, it is not considered supply. And only certain actors, as a consequence, are allowed to engage in the activity of energy sharing. And in the Flemish proposal, this is the participants of citizen energy communities and renewable energy communities, and additionally, active customers in the same building. So what are our conclusions? Well, of course, a lot remains to be decided, but a first impression is that there are definitely a lot of positive elements in this proposal, especially the inclusion of heating in the legal framework. Also that if the new legal framework finally arrives, this will provide a lot of much needed legal certainty for projects, and of course in the future, these projects will keep on playing a leading role for the development of energy communities, and also that there is a facilitating role for the DSO. But a lot of issues remain undecided. For example, the European directives talk about the inclusion of vulnerable customers, but it is rather unclear what exactly the Flemish government will do to include vulnerable customers. Also, the current proposal doesn't say much about any facilitating measures, so we suspect that that will be a thing that will be worked out later. And the third thing, that a very important thing that remains undecided, is what will happen to the tariffs. There is a small mention of the tariffs in the current proposal, but so it leaves the current proposal leaves it open to do the Flemish government to analyze in a cost-benefit analysis to see if energy communities can provide benefits to the grid, and if this can be a reason for a certain tariff that is applied in Flanders for energy communities. So that was a very short 6 things that we discussed about the Flemish, to give you an impression about the Flemish proposal, and we thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kobe. Thank you, Hilde, for this presentation about the Flemish specificities about the new regulation. We see that we have 3 regions in Belgium, 3 ways of discovering this framework from Europe and interpreting this legislation in our own legislation. And we see for sure some similarities about the energy manager roles, but we see specificities like the open door for the distribution system, and it could be very interesting to see the projects in this type of simulation of distribution system, private, let's say, distribution system owner. We will directly go to the case from France. I'm really happy to have Mohamed Lajibi from Enedis, so the public DSO, here in the room to have the presentation for the regulation and contracting experience for France. So Mohamed, if you can share your screen. Yes.
Yes. Hello,
we
everyone.
don't see the full screen. Maybe you can display it.
Right. Is it okay for you?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk today about energy communities, for sure, like all the colleagues have done before, but I will also talk about collective self-consumption, which we see as at Enedis as a pathway to energy communities, and also this energy sharing mechanism that we will see in the next month. So yes, first of all, I do work for Enedis at the Clients and Territories Division, and we do work at the Energy Transition Solutions Department, where we shape the way we envision these energy communities, this collective self-consumption mechanism, and also all the task about the traceability and certification of energy. What I'm going to go through today is a rapid introduction about the context in France, where you can see all these energy communities that emerge, talking about self-consumption, individual and collective, go through the legal and regulatory framework of the collective self-consumption, some contractual aspects with the legal entity and person that also acts in energy communities, key figures and use cases, and we will extend the discussion to evolution and perspective regarding these energy communities and how we are going to transpose it in France in our energy code. So here first, the context in France. So it's not something new for you, but we have lots of expectations, social expectations. We would like to consume more renewables. We as a citizen want to have more selections and choice regarding the way we consume, the way we source our energy, and also this this increasing demand of local distribution channels. So this is the broad context where all these energy communities go today. We do have also, in the other hand, a proactive policy where we have at the state level this energy transition law that was voted in 2015. We also have the energy and climate law and the European clean energy package that provides some guidelines for the country in order to modify and to make this new market evolve. And finally, at Enedis, because Enedis is the main DSO of France, covering more than 90% points and network in France. We do have this industrial and human project where we have an objective, a main objective, which is to strengthen our know-how at the service of the green transition. So you can see in several aspects, but you can also see it in this energy sharing and inclusion of energy communities. So yes, first about self-consumption principles, I will go very rapidly about that. You have, let's say, three ways to consume today. So you have this, you're connected to the network and you can make your contract with your supplier, and you will just have your basic supply with your client, with your supplier. You also have, on the other hand, the self-consumption, which can be individual or collective. Where it's individual, you all install your photovoltaic panel through your house, and you consume what you produce at your house. And you have the collective aspect, which is an extension where you can also enjoy this local production from PV panels, not only from your house, but also from, let's say, an operation where you have some neighborhood, but also extended area where all this local production can be shared with you and your fellows in this operation. So yeah, first have to bear it in mind. So whether it's individual or collective, this self-consumption is something that is growing a lot here in France, and that you can see in any figures that we produce here in France. And the main added value for this self-consumption is that first, it depends how you made your economic model, but you can save money on your energy bill if you design properly your installation. You can at least choose the origin of the energy. We know that it's not the perfect electron that you can get from this operation that will go to your house, for example, in a collective self-consumption operation, but at least you can found and keep this in mind. And finally, it's also a way for local authorities and territories to act effectively in order to engage their territory in the green transition. So yeah, I talk about collective and individual. So first, you have the individual one where you're just alone and the public grid does not see the energy that is self-consumed by the user. You will only inject onto the network the surplus. Whereas in the collective self-consumption, you will have all the streams included in the network. That means that all these producers will inject their production through the public network, and it will be then divided and shared between all the consumers of the operation, thanks to this legal entity, the so-called PMO, that is something really central in this collective self-consumption operation. Rapidly talking about finance, where you're individual, you will not pay some supplier or distribution on the self-consumed part. That means that the electricity that you generate on site will not be charged, or you will not pay about supply, tax, or distribution aspects. And you're, let's say, qualified for feed-in tariffs and renewable obligation certificates to help rationale the economics of your installation. Whereas in the collective self-consumption, it's more difficult. At the moment, we don't have any feed-in tariffs and renewable obligation certificates, at least for the surplus. And you still have the opportunity to subscribe to a specific distribution tariff. That is something new that we added. I think it was 2 years ago, but it's still difficult for the producers to be profitable in this kind of operation. That means that the main objective is not it's not about money. It's about kind of social inclusion and this greener responsibility that emerged today with all the actors within this collective self-consumption operation. So yeah, just this conclusion that I would like to provide with this evolution is that we are going from this classic functioning of the electricity market to the individual self-consumption, going now to collective self-consumption, and the next step is the energy community that we have talked before. Talking about this legislation, we can see that this path has begun at least 6 years ago with, for example, this collective self-consumption operation mentioned in the green transition law here in France. Then we have some decree ordinance that in 2016 allowed to define, a bit the CSE in the French energy code. I'm not going to say all these details, but you can see that first we were only about the network aspects, and now we're working more about geographic aspects, extending this area in this collective self-consumption operation from 2 kilometers for all this extended operation. And we also have some, let's say, exemption where you can go up to 20 kilometers between the furthest participant within this operation. And the next one, the next step that we are waiting here in France is it's the adaptation of the European directive, where you can see that this renewable energy community and citizen energy communities will also open the medium voltage to all this collective self-consumption operation. So yeah, we can see that the legislation is evolving, and it's in order to stimulate this CSC operation and broadly this energy communities operation, because we see this CSC operation, this collective self-consumption operation, as first steps of energy communities and at least renewable energy communities here in France. Talking about this legislation, I just translated all the article in the French energy code that you can see here. And the things that we need to bear in mind is that an operation, self-consumption operation is said collective when you have several producers, one or several producers and one or several customers gathered through a legal person that we'll talk afterwards. And these participants can be located in the same building, or they can be, let's say, located in an extended area, in a limited extended area, where they can enjoy the energy sharing between all the participants. And right now, in the French Energy Code, it's only on the low voltage network, but it will evolve during the year and will be opened to medium voltage as well. So yeah, about the models of CSC operation. So you have the possibility to be in the same building. So it's very straightforward about how you can share the energy within the same building. There is no power restriction. And you can also work with some commercial buildings, because you can do it at the medium voltage level about the network. And you also have the second way, it's the extended area, where you have two types. You have the standard extended area, where you have 2 kilometers maximum between the furthest participants within the area. And it's only on the low voltage at the moment, and you have some limitation about the aggregated production within this operation. And the other one, which is more recent, is this so-called rural exemption, which is delivered by the French Energy and Climate Ministry. And in this situation, you can have some, let's say, 20 kilometers between the further participant. That will be very useful for operation that struggled to start over the last year because of the extended limitation. So yes, the stakeholders involved in this CSC operation, these are the same stakeholders that you can have all the in these energy communities also operation. So yeah, you have this legal person where you have the producers, the consumers, you have this legal person and all these assistance and outsourcing that can help better manage this operation with the legal consulting, operational consulting, and also design offices that work beforehand in order to dimension the production. You have the DSO, like Enedis, but not only Enedis, because we have, I said before, 5% of the network which is not administered by Enedis. And you have the market actors with the suppliers, the balance responsible in entities, and also the surplus trader that acts very often to, let's say, optimize the production that you can have within your operation, and make the link between the operation and the market. So yes, just great aspects and features regarding this CSC operations. So the main prerequisite, it relies on the public distribution network. You must be connected in standard conditions. So you don't have the possibility to be in the private, let's say, connection and enjoy this CSC framework. You need to be equipped with smart meters. And if you don't have any smart meters, and it is say that they can accelerate the deployment for the willing participant. And then you need to have some clear contractual aspects with the consumers. They need to have a supplier. All the producers need to have a balanced responsible entity contracts, which is at the moment is a limitation because you have lots of small producers. And this person, this legal person, must sign a contract with Enedis, ruling all the the aspects and the communication between these two entities. About the PMO, which is something that was created for the purpose of this CSC operation. All the participants, we say producers and customers, must be gathered through this legal person. Regarding the law, there is no specific recommendation regarding this legal structure of the PMO, and sometimes an existing legal structure is enough to be PMO and to run this CSC operation. But in the case that you have some doubts on some difficulties to set this right form of the PMO, you can solicit a legal analysis And we as a DSO and ENEDIS, we don't provide this legal advice, but we encourage all these participants and producers and customers to engage these studies if they are not sure of the legal aspects of the PMO. So yeah, the PMO is I said they have the PMO has a central role within this CSC operation because they will help to share the energy between all the participants of the operation. So they will communicate, for example, to ENEDIS the way ENEDIS should share the energy within the operation with some distribution key that will be provided either way beforehand, like you do your calculation in your simulation and you give it to ENEDIS, but also after the operation, after the period when they can optimize seeing the charging loads within the operation and send it to ENEDIS in order to apply it for the billing. So yeah, about these interactions. So we divided this life cycle of CSC operation into 4 stages. So you have first the initialization, then you have the launch, calculation, and the data release to the stakeholders. And at any stage of this life cycle, we have some close relationships between ENEDIS, the DSO, and the PMO in order to set the things right, and at first to have a clear signature of the contracts, to control the prerequisites of all the participants, to manage and to follow up the entry and exit of participants, because like in energy communities, you're free to enter and to exit this kind of operations, and working also on this distribution key, so as to be able to apply some modification, or to let's say you can have a PMO that doesn't want to transfer this distribution key, and this can also act with a standard way to share this energy within the operation. And finally, you send these data so as to allow the PMO and also the suppliers to bill their clients. Yeah, rapidly the way that it works here in France. So every month you have let's say an operation when you have 3 clients and 1 PV generators, let's say one producers, and they are recorded on the low voltage network. And any client has its own supplier. So let's say client 2 and 1 have their supplier X, and client 3, they have their supplier Y. And you have the consumption from the network and the injection into the network from the PV generator in order to cover this local consumption, but also the consumption from the network in order to cover the remaining consumption that will not be supplied by the injection, the local injection. So yeah, first ENEDIS will measure the consumption and production for all of the participants every single 30 minutes. So looking at how you consume and looking at how you inject. If you're we say auto producers, and you inject and also you consume. Then you make the calculation. So you measure the consumption for each client. Let's say 65 for client 1, 50 for client 2, and 90 for client 3. You have the production made by the PV generator, which is 100. You divide this production between the customers thanks to the distribution key that you provided beforehand to ENEDIS. So let's say you have 20%, 35%, and 40% for the three clients. So you have this so-called auto self-consumption part of the supply. So you can see here with the 25, 35, and 40, like the percentage that you can see above. And finally, you have this additional quantity of electricity that is provided by each supplier in order to cover the whole consumption of their clients. So you have 40 for the client 1, 15 for client 2, and 15 and 50 for client 3. That's the way it functions. You send all the data afterwards to the stakeholders, where you have the PMO, you also have the producers, and you mainly have the suppliers that are in charge of billing the clients regarding their consumption every month. So that's the way it works today. So this is, broad synthesis between all the actors and the stakeholders of a CSC operation, where you have the consumers and producer within the PMO. They are connected to the public distribution network, which is really important to bear in mind for injection and also for consumption. You have this contract, this convention between Enedis and the PMO that rules all these communications and rights between over this operation. You can also have these electricity exchanges within this the CSC operation, where you can have some contracts, some PPA between consumers and producers. I say you can have this PPA because mainly you don't have this PPA at the moment. You only have producers really to divide their surplus to the others fellow of the operation. But we are witnessing more and more operation where producers tend to optimize their investments and to modulate their price of their production within the operation. We can also sell the surplus within the on the market with surplus traders, related to balance responsible entities. You also have the suppliers, which is still, existing in this operation, because the local production not always cover the consumption of the consumers. So you need to, it's mandatory to have the supplier, and they also interact in the way the operation function. So that's the broad picture, let's say, overview of a CSC operation. And you can see that a CSC operation depicting like this is working like an energy community, an energy sharing community that you can have in the European directive. About some figures, just to give it some figures. So here in France, we at the moment, it was in January, we have about 40 operations, CSC operation active. So operation that gathers about 600 participants, producers and customers. And we also have some operation in the pipe, where you can see that there is a growing interest in France regarding this CSC operations. And about this operation, there are more with these local authorities. This is I'm not gonna say the greenwashing, but it's a way for them to promote how their territory is going into the green at the green level. And we showcase at the moment lots of operation with collectivities and local authorities all over France that are very, very interested by all this operation. So yeah, you have this collective territory operation. You also have this social and housing community, let's say social housing, where you have this they have the ability to be PMO of an operation, which is very facilitating at the stage where you want to initiate an operation, and also to manage an operation. You only have one entity to talk, at least Enedis, whereas you have let's say more than 100 or 200 people living on all these buildings. It's very easy for us to follow up this operation and to provide them with all this data and so on. So these are the main cases that you can encounter today, but we are seeing more and more operation with, let's say, the creative approach, which wasn't the first thing we have at first. But now we have this lucrative operation that tends to find some economic rationale within this CSC operation that we didn't have before. So yeah, some hurdles to development and the evolution perspective. About the hurdles to developments, we have is not the English word. We have three types. So first we have the financial aspects, where you have this. We don't have any subsidies here in France for CSC operation. The tax regime is not facilitating at all in this operation. So some producers, they prefer to go to classic tools to get some payback for their installation. So this is one of the problems that needs to be overcome. We also had at first this the distance-based issue, because we needed to be in the 2 kilometers perimeter area to be part of the CSC operation, and we didn't have the ability to be part of the operation when you were at the medium voltage network. So this was very problematic for this the industrial, because they were willing to be part of this operation, but the network aspects were an issue. And the administrative aspect is also a problem, because you need sometimes to create a legal person. So you need to contact legal advisors to get the things done, and you need also to have this contract between small producers and pure player of the energy market, which is not natural for all these small producers. However, we can see that we have some evolutions, recent and forthcoming evolutions, in order to facilitate this development of the CSC operation. For example, we might have this surplus production eligible to a supporting mechanism, like we have for the individual self-consumption operation. And we do have a specific distribution tariff for CSC operation, optimizing the way they will be charged at the end of the month. You can also now be in a rural area and be part of a CSC operation, up to 20 kilometers under certain specific conditions. And we, I think within the next 2 months, we will be able to accept medium voltage sites within this CSC operation, which is a very good signal for all the people working in this area. And finally, we have the administrative one, which is for social landlords. They are not able to be to be PMO of CSC operation, which is facilitating the way we manage this operation for people and also for entities. So you can see that this regulatory framework is rapidly evolving. It's facilitating the CSC development in France. And this is, following this, let's say, this impulsion from the European Commission regarding this energy community. And talking about this energy communities, here in France, we see it as a kind of, let's say, extension. For example, for the renewable energy communities, we see it as an extension of all this CSC operation. We know that, okay, the energy communities are much, bigger than the CSC operation, because you can also sell, you can store, and you can do more stuff that only in the CSC operation. However, you can see similarities because you have renewable assets, you have a proximity limitation within these renewable energy communities. And we do think that the CSC framework that we have in France can be the supporting energy sharing mechanism in order to ease this, energy sharing, because in the end, the main aspects of this energy community will be to facilitate this energy sharing between the participants, and also to facilitate their access to the market, but also the way they will share the energy within some local areas. So the CSC mechanism and framework that I present to you today might be the mechanism that will be relying here in France, and it's also envisioned in the ordinance that is coming in the next, let's say, month or in 2 months, that the CSC operation and the CSC framework as a way to enhance the energy sharing within the community. So that's the first point about energy communities, the renewable energy communities. The second point, it's about the citizen energy communities. We here in Enedis, we think, I'm not going to tell all this definition that we have seen before with all the colleagues, and it's more about the interpretation that we have here in France. These citizen energy communities are, let's say, much broader than the renewable energy communities, because you don't have any distance limitation. You're not limited to renewable assets. Renewable citizen energy community can provide energy efficiency services, energy mix, gas, electricity, EV services. And they also have the ability to be energy supplier and balance responsible entity, which are, pure role dedicated to pure player of the energy market. So that's the way we see the things, that once you are, let's say, a citizen energy community, you can be a renewable energy community as well. And we have an expression in French when we say that le plus on peut faire, le mieux c'est. Once you are a citizen energy community, you can be renewable energy community, and that's not the issue with that. However, we don't have here in France any example in the pipe regarding these energy communities. People are still waiting for the legislation to be adapted here in France. We still have some things. For example, these citizen energy communities, they cannot be DSO here in France. That's a point which is important for us as the main DSO in France. We don't have any information about this supporting mechanism. That's also very important in order to facilitate the development of these energy communities. So we don't have any at the moment information about the tariffs, like I've seen before for the others fellows. So we're still waiting for these clarifications, and we're also waiting for some. So first the ordinance, and then the decree, the order, in order to put some clear aspects within this renewable energy communities and also citizen energy communities, because at the moment it is, we say, vague, and we need to have some clear aspects regarding that. And finally, what we can say about our interpretation of these energy communities is that REC and KEC are like two instruments that can empower citizens and local authorities regarding their their inclusion into this energy market. And we, Enedis, as a strategic partner of this local, for example, authorities, we are ready to assist and help to contribute to the development of this REC and KEC. For example, the CSC, you can see that we have a central role where we can facilitate this energy sharing and some administrative aspects that are not really easy for people to envision. So we are here. We still wait the release of this order here in France, and this adaptation of the European Union directive. And we are still thinking about what kind of services we can provide to this REC and the NKEC, and see how the DSO can help all these all these operations to emerge and to facilitate their development. So
thank you, Mohamed, for the presentation. And for this overview of what is going on in France. I think it's very interesting to exchange, because we have some energy communities project that could be related in a way in France, and we can exchange about it. And you have some great self-consumption, collective self-consumption projects ongoing. So I think it's very interesting. There is two questions for you, but I think you have answered them during the presentation. So you, so the first one is more the difference between the rural and city prices. So there is no mention, you have not mentioned the prices because there is no grid fees, let's say, decided yet, but you have mentioned the difference between cities and rural in terms of the criteria of distance.
Yes.
And so that's a great, I think, for a great example for us as well, because we don't have this type of, we don't have decided yet the number of kilometers of this criteria. We don't use it for right now still, but I think it's quite interesting. But maybe France, it's a larger country than Belgium.
Yeah,
Belgium
maybe.
is more dense, so let's see if there is some similarities over there. The other question was the place of the territoire d'énergie, so in the new players, so the public collective collectivity that manage the energy, and you have mentioned it during the presentation. So I think you have answered the two questions that have been said in the chat. So very thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
And we have the last presentation. We have so Nicola Giampaolo. So had the problem this morning with his health issue from his father. So he was not able to be there. He is sending us the presentation, and so we had a proposition for the Janson lowers that can maybe present in 2 minutes the global overview of the legislation. So it's a hard work because they have, in fact, a colleague from Italy. And so I think she will present in 2 minutes very quickly the overview in Italy. And for sure, you will receive the presentation because it's quite comprehensive presentation for the regulation for Italy. So if I'm not mistaken, you're there. So if I'm not mistaken, it's Xeni or
it's Jenny.
Jenny, okay.
Yeah.
So very thank you to be there and to present very quickly so the case in Italy. And thank you for this.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank Nicola, first of all, for these beautiful slides. I hope you'll be very clement with me. I didn't have any time to prepare this. So, but I saw three important points that we should focus on. So I thought I would maybe say something about it. So apart from the European legislative framework, which is, I think we already covered during these presentations. The decree in Italy is the number 162 of 2019, and we should focus on Article 42 bis. And apart from the general implementation of the EU directive of 2018, the RED II directive, we should talk about the fact that there is a maximum capacity of 200 kilowatt, which is not yet defined, for example, in Wallonia or in the Brussels region, and which is also different from what we just heard in France, which is 3 megawatt, I think. So a pretty smaller REC in Italy. We also have the fact that we need to create a formal recognized entity between the participants, and are allowed to participate private persons, SME companies, associations, and local councils. But of course, without overstepping the boundaries of becoming a commercial or industrial activity. The second point that I think is pretty interesting is that the just a second here, is that the supporting scheme that they are thinking of providing for renewable energy communities is a feed-in tariff. Again, this is not provided yet in Wallonia or in the Brussels regions, and as I think I heard in France, it was like it is not yet the case. So the Ministry of Economic Development established the incentives, the energy produced by each of the renewable energy installations forming part of the configurations of collective self-consumption or of community renewable energies that is shared, has the right, or can benefit for a period of 20 years to an incentive rate in the form of a tariff premium. And that is 100 euros per megawatt hour when production plant is part of a collective self-consumption configuration, or 110 euros per megawatt hour when the plant is part of a renewable energy community. And the third point, I think, is that at the beginning we said for Wallonia that we could use a public grid or private grids are allowed. So we're still waiting, of course, for the government regulation to better specify the details. But as I can see in Italy, it's not the case. So we can only use the existing grid. So in slide number 6, great. Article 42b says the sharing and distribution of energy is made with the use of the existing grid. So there is not this possibility in Italy. And the rest, yes, they need the approbation, of course, of the Italian regulatory authority, ARERA, and the Ministry for Economic Development should provide for the provisions to better regulate and implement, of course, the operation of the RECs. Well, I would say that is all I have to say on my side.
Yeah. Thank you. For sure, we will send a presentation, and for this quick overview from Italy. Grazie per la sua presentazione.
Thank you to Metroblock for putting me in this awesome position.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Very appreciated.
A good exercise. So we have learned here 3 different ways of let's say discovering this framework of from Europe, and we see that it's going in different directions. We see similarities, but also differences. I've received a question, so I will take 5 or 10 minutes maybe discussion and not less. So at noon we will close the session. I've received a question for Hilde because there is a cost and benefit analysis that is planned in Flanders for the tariffs. We know that the tariffs are very important to improve the cases, the business case of the energy communities. The question is, it's only the tariffs that are part of the cost and benefits analysis, or there is other aspects? I suppose the question is, do we consider as well the role of energy communities as a booster for energy community energy production, as an inclusion for to put the citizen in the center of the room right now? So is there other aspects in this analysis? It's not a regulatory question, but still maybe you can answer it. you are in a
Kobe,
new.
Kobe, yes, sorry. Kobe will answer it.
Okay, okay, Kobe.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I had to quickly look it up myself, and the part of the proposal that I was talking about only mentions, I don't know if I will be able to translate it correctly. So in Dutch they say bijdragen aan de ontlasting van het distributienet. So they will make a cost benefit analysis about in which way energy communities can add or can contribute to
that the grid isn't as charged as it is now. That there is a discharge of the grid. It's a bit complicated.
Yeah,
but that's as we can translate it. Yes.
Yeah. So it may be that there are other things that will be analyzed, as there is mentioned in the proposal that is about energy communities. That is what they mention about tariffs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So I have one global question, maybe for each of you, when you have heard all the different regulatory ways of and regulation, different regulation that we have in the different countries. What's for you is the, let's say, in your own regulation that you have studied, what is the better point? What is the good one, let's say, the good idea, and what is maybe the risk that you can prevent, or what we have to pay attention maybe in one aspect for the regulation? And maybe I start with Guy for the Brussels and Wallonia part.
Yes, well, we have seen that there are major issues. One of them could be the form of the legal entity, and as it's already said, it's not obvious for citizens to enter into a legal entity, and we should transform that requirement into sort of advantage. The point of the ownership, the ultimate ownership of the power plant is for me very crucial, because if we go to a third party investment, we cannot refer to the normal system that we have today, or at least to keep a large part of that. It works very well today. A lot of PV or wind farm are under so-called third-party investment, and we should keep that advantage. In terms of bankability, I'm very concerned about those issues, because none of these power plants are auto-financed, never. So the bank should be comfortable with the legal entity, with the leasing or whatever, or third-party investment scheme, and that is my full concern. If you want to kill the CR, add too much regulation, it's going to kill them immediately, because no one has the money to finance. I'm sorry to be cash, but that is a main issue of bankability. The thing could be fantastic, but once you have a meeting with your banker, he will say, look, I have no security, I have no thing. You a club of friends, okay, that's fine, but I want to finance this. Okay, so come up with the money or subsidy from the region, which is the same, and then, so we have to be very careful with the bankability of that. And that is for me for the rest. I mean, the lawyer and the engineer will adopt the rules, and I think the second point is counting and of the electricity. I mean, everything is available today. Intelligence, artificial intelligence is there. There is no problem. Metering is not an issue. We have everything available today, so that's going to be not an issue. But the bankability for me is an issue in terms of even control of the entity, guarantee from the entity, ultimate ownership of the entity, etc., etc. And as the last speakers say, yeah, the PPA is as you know, always used to finance a scheme. We use a lot of PPAs and we put them into as a guarantee, because tied to the PPA are sort of step-in rights, it's so-called guarantee in kind. So yes, that are my two main issues.
Okay, thank you, Guy. For Hild, maybe, or Kobe, for you, is it the same points in Flanders? Let's say the good points of the regulation right now, or the ideas at least, and maybe the risks that you can see right now?
Well, right now, what I think is a good thing is how they define proximity. It depends on what kind of energy it is. Is it eolian, the wind, or when it is PV? It is different for the scope of the proximity. I think that is a good one. I think what Guy says concerning the finance is that's a very important thing. That's what comes out of Rolex too, or what is one of the conclusions of Rolex. You can build legally, you can build on a good way an energy community, but if it is a business case, that's a big question. So I follow in what he's saying, that remains a big problem, I think. And what the Flemish legislation is left also, that there is too much left there is still a lot left to be decided by the government or by the maybe that's good when it is in parliament and there can still be decided, but I think there are a lot of lacks in it which is not be decided, and it can still go in any way, and that's not very assuring for legal aspects either. So that's a bit my opinion on it.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe for Mohamed, for the French point of view, what is let's say the good point for you in France right now in the self-consumption area, and maybe the risk that you can prevent?
Yeah, I think first is we said it before, the administrative issue with the legal person. It's difficult for citizens and local authorities to understand how they should gather regarding this legal person. So you have lots of pedagogy, education, and for all the stakeholders, and specifically for them. You also have the issues with the suppliers, because they don't play the game, I can say. Sometimes you can send them some data to build their clients, and sometimes they don't consider this data. So that's an issue that we face at the moment, and I think that with this renewable energy community, it will be more and more builds to be done, and with this energy sharing activities, there needs to be at the right level. We also think for these citizen energy communities, another problem could be the way they act as a energy market actor, traditional energy market actor. You cannot ask to a local authority to be like EDF or like ENGIE, covering your balance between production and consumption. This balance responsible entity, like the directive authorized today. So that can be an issue, because there is a big step to be done. And the other parts is to be this kind of actor in the market. you need to provide some financial guarantee, you know, to be like I said before, this balanced responsible entity. And how will you do that with these local authorities or with these citizens? It's not very clear at the moment. And you know, above all, I think that this clarification should come up in the next month and maybe in the next year, because it takes time to define it properly. And without all these clarifications, it will be difficult for these communities to develop. Otherwise, they will develop, but they will, you know, collapse in the month afterwards. So yeah, these are, you know, the main risk I see at the moment, and needs to be clarified.
Yeah, thank you. So the importance of the role of the suppliers as a service contract, as we said, to provide the services and the value in the energy communities. Thank you. To conclude, maybe with Achille, did you learn some information during this webinar? Did you are you maybe surprised by some ideas in the legislation that we have in Flanders, Wallonia, Brussels, France, and Italy, or you are quite happy in the way we consider this framework?
Yes, thank you, Cedric. I should start with, again, a disclaimer. I will not commit the Commission's views, of course, at this stage, but I'm very pleased with seeing how it's progressing in the different member states. I was aware of the Flemish framework. The Italian is quite interesting with this contemplation of a feed-in tariff. I very much think this is an original approach that is being taken, and an original implementation of the provision on a customized support scheme for renewable energy communities. My key takeaway was also the presentation by Mohamed, the PMO. I think this is a very interesting construction that can be transplanted in the future to energy communities, even energy communities taking up maybe or taking over the role of a PMO, or coordinating, cooperating with them. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing renewable energy communities emerge in France with the implementation of the legal framework, and subsequently how this current scheme for collective self-consumption will fit there. That being said, I think what I take away also from this learning experience is that there is a very much a focus on collective self-consumption. I do agree with Mohamed that energy sharing will be a core activity that will also need to be optimized and will be used to optimize collective self-consumption, so energy communities can ultimately also provide system benefits and operate on flexibility markets, which I would think might also contribute to building a business case in the near future, as this was identified as a key barrier by two of our participants. So I think this is something that we should further explore in the future, how energy communities can operate on these flexibility markets and can be remunerated for their services. And that being said, I very much enjoyed this session and the update from all of the member states that were represented today. And I thank the speakers and of course, the organizers.
Thank you thank you all the speakers. We've learned a lot about the regulation, about the energy communities today. Next week we will speak about pilot project. For sure the clusters are managing pilot projects to provide some information that can be used to change the regulations. So we will learn about the pilot projects next week in the next session. And for sure, I think it's very interesting to discover the regulation, but also the pilot projects in other countries, because if we identify a way of working that is functioning for the players, the suppliers, the producers, the citizens, for sure, and for the grid operators, we have to learn each other what is functioning or not, because it's an European way to move forward to the energy transition. So very thank you for the different speakers. You will receive the slides and the recording today with the link for the next presentation. And if you have some B2B meetings, you can join these B2B meetings in the tool that you have been provided. So thank you. Have a good lunch. And I hope to see you soon in real world, let's say. And bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.